everybody, welcome to my tutorial on how to make a fabric headband out of just scraps. And what you'll need to do this is first your fabric. You can use a scrap, or you can go to the fabric store and buy about 1/8 of a yard of fabric. And you probably want to pre-wash your fabric as you do for any project, just to remove any shrinking or anything like that. And then you'll need some interfacing. I usually use fusible, which just irons onto the fabric. You can also use a sew-on. It just would depend on the type of fabric you're going to use. Sometimes fusibles don't work great with certain fabrics, but for 9 out of 10 types of fabrics, a fusible will work just fine for this project. And you'll need the same length, about 14.5 inches, plus about 2 inches wide of interfacing. And then you're just going to need a scrap of elastic. You can use this one, which is about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch wide if you want, but 1/4 inch also works just fine. And you can also get this in different colors if you want. This is like a natural or a white, but if you were going to use like a black fabric or a darker fabric, you might want to go with a black elastic. But this really doesn't show too well, so you don't have to worry about that too much. And you're going to need anywhere from about 5 to 7 inches of elastic for this project. And then you're also going to need a measuring device of some sort, some scissors and pins, obviously an iron if you're going to iron on interfacing, and then you're going to need some paper to make your pattern, and then you would need a sewing machine. You could hand sew this technically, but it'll take you a little while, so a sewing machine would be very helpful. But this is a very beginner level project if you want to start with something that you could finish in less than an hour easily. So how you're going to start is get a piece of paper, and you're probably going to want something a little wider than regular copy or computer paper, because this particular pattern needs to be 14.5 inches long. And what I often use to make my patterns is just wrapping paper from the local dollar store. It's great because it's very wide and it's cheap. And another great thing about it is it has these 1-inch grid squares on the back, so it makes pattern making pretty easy. And so what you're going to do is create your pattern. And as I stated, this particular pattern is 14.5 inches long. So if you don't have the grid to count 14.5 squares, you can just use your ruler and mark that 14.5 inches long. And the widest point here is going to be 2 inches. 2 inches wide. And what you could do is put this on a fold and measure 2 inches, and then you're going to gradually taper it down to the smallest point here, which is actually 1.5 inches wide. So at the smallest it's 1.5, and it tapers up to the fold to be 2 inches wide. And on this particular project, you're going to take up a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that's very important to remember, not a 5/8, a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what you're going to go ahead and do is use your pattern piece that you just made, and you're going to take your fabric right sides together and cut out 2 of your pattern piece out of fabric and 1 out of the interfacing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so once you've cut out your 2 fabric pattern pieces and 1 of interfacing, your next step would be to fuse or to iron on the interfacing to the wrong side of 1 of your pattern pieces of fabric. And how you can tell, if you've already thrown away the instructions, on fusible interfacing you can feel little bumps on the side that actually has the adhesive. That's the glue side. So you're going to put the glue side down. And then all you do is basically just use your iron and just iron down the interfacing onto the wrong side of 1 of your fabric pieces. Okay, so once you've got the interfacing ironed onto the back of 1 piece, you're also going to want to iron both pieces to make sure they're nice and flat. I also use a little bit of spray starch, which is why my ironing board is such a mess. But anyway, you can use a little bit of spray starch just to get this nice and flat and straight and crisp. And then your next step is going to be on just 1 side of each piece. You're going to fold it down about 1/2 inch, I'm sorry, 1/4 of an inch
put it down about 1/4 inch here and here. And then you want to iron that flat, that little fold, just on one side. Leave the other side alone, but just on one side, fold down 1/4 inch and iron that down. Okay, so once you've got one side of both of your pattern pieces folded down towards the wrong side of the fabric and towards the inner facing side of the other piece, about 1/4 inch, then what you're going to do is on the right side is you're going to attach one piece of elastic, and you can attach it to either side. I usually just attach it to the interfaced piece of fabric, but it really doesn't matter. And what you could do, you cut your elastic anywhere between 5 and 7 inches. I use about 5 inches for someone Lane's size, which is a toddler about 3 years old. If you're making one for an adult, you might want to go with more like 7 inches, but it really is just going to depend on your hair and the size of your head and all. So if you're unsure what size piece of elastic to cut, go ahead and cut larger, like a 7-inch piece, because you can adjust it after the fact, and I'll show you how to do that. But if you know your piece, if you're making a little girl or something, just go ahead with 5 inches or whatever. And then what you're going to do is in the center of one piece is just lay your elastic, and then you're going to just stitch across right there just to attach that elastic to the edge here. And you're only going to take up about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here, but make sure that you attach it very, very well so it sticks. And we're going to go ahead and do that. So once you have sewn and affixed your piece of elastic onto the one non-folded side of your interfaced piece of fabric, what you're going to then do is pin your two fabric pieces together, right sides together or pretty sides together, and you're going to be matching the two sides that you folded down. Just pin all the way around, leaving just this edge with the two folded pieces open for turning. But what you want to do is go all the way around the perimeter, and the most important thing when you're sewing this is to make sure that that piece of elastic that you tacked here on the end stays loose here in the middle and doesn't get put into your side seams, because that would be bad. So just make sure that it's floating freely here in the center. And also leave the two folded sections here open, and don't stitch across that, because we're going to need to use this for turning. Is using only a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Don't go any wider than that, or you can even use 1/4 inch, and just go all the way around this perimeter on top this edge, close this edge up, stitching over where you stitch the elastic, and then back around here. So once you've got it stitched all the way around, this is how it looks. And again, your folded edge here is open, and you can just go in with a pair of pinking shears and just grade this. This is what it looks like after you've used pinking shears. They come in very handy if you to stop fraying and also to grade fabric for curves and things. So then your next step would be to turn right side out, and you would be using your opening here, which is the two folded ends, and go ahead and start flipping this and turn this right side out. And it's a little bit tricky of a process. It's having something like this, a little chopstick without a point. You don't want to point because you don't want to stab through your fabric and make a hole. But something with a blunt end like this comes in handy for turning tight tubes like this. Okay, so once you've done that hardest part, which is turning this right side out, this is what it's going to look like. And you've got your little piece of elastic that's encased in there, hanging out the one side, and then your two folds here with your one open end. And what you'll go ahead and do next is probably want to iron this nice and flat. Alright, so once you've got it ironed nice and flat, then your next part would be to bring it around. It's kind of challenging to do holding the phone at the same time, but you're going to tuck your end of your elastic into the little opening that you've made with the two folded parts, and go ahead and stitch it in. Now this is the part that I told you that you could adjust size. So if you weren't exactly sure how much elastic length to put, you could kind of feed this in and pin it in place and then try it on. And if it's too loose, go ahead and trim it up or stick more elastic inside. But if you know that you need only about 5 inches for a little girl, you're only going to feed in about 1/4 of an inch or so in and tuck it into the middle. I say put it like in the sandwich in between those two folded areas, and then you're going to stitch across there and securing the elastic, and you want to make sure you secure it nice and tight in there because it will be kind of a stress point. So you can do that, and then if you'd like, you can also continue that stitching where you secure the elastic all the way around the edge, doing a top stitch. And you can either use a thread that blends so that you don't really see it as much, or if you want to add some accent, you can use a bolder color or a decorative stitch. That's totally up to you. This part is optional for the top stitching. It kind of gives it a nice finished edge, but you certainly don't have to do it if you don't want to. So those would be your next steps there.
So once you have secured the elastic into the folded areas and stitched that closed and then done your top stitching, then you have this, your completed fabric headband. And as you saw, it's not too difficult. It can be turned out pretty easily once you know what you're doing. And you can wear it just like this, or you can make it your own by adding stuff. And that the sky's really the limit as far as what you can do there. You can add small like little ribbon roses along the way. You can add decorative buttons, just stitch them along. You can purchase or you can make a fabric flower. They sell these at the craft stores, but you can make one like this with a decorative button and some chiffon that you actually burn to make the edges go up like this. And you can kind of put that off center. You can also get fake flowers from the dollar store or the craft store or whatever in various sizes. This one's a little bit big, but you could get different sizes like this one and either just do one accent piece to the side, or you can go all the way around and make more like a floral headband that's kind of in style right now. You can also make a matching or coordinating fabric bow, like I did with Lane's Tsum Tsum dress, a very large bow, and you can basically stitch that down onto the headband. There's lots and lots of things you can do. For her Anakin and Padme dress, I actually used this sequin trim here, and I affixed that to the headband, and then I went in and added these colored Swarovski crystals just to add some bling and sparkle, and that just kind of made a different looking headband there. But again, like for her superhero dress, I just made a regular fabric headband with no embellishments. And as you see, once you've kind of got the basic idea, you can vary it. You can go and make it a little wider or a little more narrow. You don't want to go too narrow because it makes it turning it a bit more of a challenge. But you can certainly, you know, make them a little bit different. You can sew ribbon onto this or anything that you like and just make them your own. And as you see, for a couple of these I used the narrow 1/4 inch elastic, but I have used the wider elastic before. It really makes no difference. It's a good way to use up scraps of elastic. And as I mentioned earlier, you can use colored elastic if you'd like. It really makes no difference because it's usually hidden behind your hair. But that's my brief tutorial on how to make a fabric headband, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Cut the gingerbread and eat the gingerbread. Okay?
Okay. Do you like your new headband?
Yeah.
Yeah? What color is it?
I don't think. Is it yellow?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to do my job.
Okay. I love you. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Thanks for watching. Okay.